They said his heart froze the moment he heard the news. Ethan Miller sat alone in his penthouse overlooking San Francisco Bay. The city lights nothing but a blur through his tears. The wheelchair beneath him no longer felt like a prison, it had become his identity. 10 years had passed since the accident that stole his legs, his husband, and the child they had almost called their own. Now a tech billionaire with a reputation for ruthlessness, Ethan had built walls stronger than any firewall his company had ever created. But walls, no matter how strong, always have cracks. The story began in 2012 when Ethan, then just a talented programmer with dreams bigger than his bank account, first locked eyes with Michael Davidson across a crowded Tech for Good conference. Michael, with his warm smile and designer glasses, stood out among the sea of hoodies and startup pitches. As the evening's featured UI designer, Michael had just finished presenting an accessibility platform for children with special needs. "Your work," Ethan had said, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne, "it's not just good code, it's actually helping people." Michael had taken the glass with a smile that would change everything. Isn't that what technology should do? In the background, San Francisco was alive with rainbow flags and protest signs. California's fight for marriage equality had brought both hope and tension to the city. For Ethan, who had grown up in a Boston household where his sexuality was treated as a phase to overcome, the atmosphere felt like permission to breathe. Their relationship bloomed against this backdrop, coffee dates turning into dinner plans, late-night coding sessions evolving into whispered dreams. Sarah Chen, Ethan's colleague and closest friend, watched with quiet joy as Ethan's walls came down. "You deserve this," she told him during a company lunch. "After everything your family put you through, you deserve someone who sees you." The trouble began 6 months later at the Davidson family estate, a sprawling property in Napa Valley where old money met new politics. Michael's brother Jonathan, a rising star in conservative politics, had arranged what he called a family introduction. In reality, it was an ambush. "My brother's personal choices are his own," Jonathan had stated coldly over a dinner that felt more like a deposition. "But surely you understand that my campaign of supporters would find this relationship problematic." Elizabeth and Thomas Davidson, Michael's parents, had sat in calculated silence, their disapproval evident in every unanswered question about Ethan's family, his career, his intentions. Despite the rejection, Ethan and Michael grew stronger. They bought a modest apartment near the Castro district. They volunteered at a local children's home, and there, among children who knew too much about or rejection themselves, they met Theo, a 6-year-old with intelligent eyes and a quiet demeanor who had lost his parents in a car accident. "He reminds me of you," Michael had whispered one afternoon as they watched Theo carefully building a tower of blocks. "The way he thinks through everything before making a move." When they decided to pursue adoption, they knew it wouldn't be easy. The system was complex enough for traditional couples. For them, it would be a maze of paperwork, home studies, and potential disappointment. But for Theo, they would try. The final confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday evening when they invited the Davidsons to their apartment to announce their intention to adopt. Jonathan's face had darkened like the storm outside. "This has gone far enough," he'd said, standing abruptly. "First this relationship. Now you want to bring a child into it? There will be consequences, Michael. Severe ones." As lightning flashed outside their apartment window, neither Ethan nor Michael realized just how prophetic those words would be, or how high the price of their love would ultimately be. If this story touches your heart, make sure to subscribe to Heart Stories, where we bring you real stories of courage, love, and resilience. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had to fight for the family you chose, not the one you were born into. The phone call came on a Thursday evening. Ethan was working late at his startup office when his cell phone lit up with Michael's name. The adoption agency had approved their application for Theo. After months of interviews, background checks, and anxious waiting, they had finally received the news they had been hoping for. Theo would officially become their son. "Come to the hospital," Michael said, his voice bright with happiness. Theo had his final health checkup. Everything's perfect. We're waiting for you so we can celebrate together. Ethan remembers the rain against his windshield, the playlist he'd made for Theo humming softly through the speakers. He remembers checking his rearview mirror and noticing the black SUV that had been following him since he left the office. He remembers reaching for his phone to call Michael back when his brakes suddenly failed. The crash wasn't quick. It wasn't merciful. Metal twisted against metal as his car spun across 3 lanes of traffic before slamming into the concrete median. Pain exploded through his lower body, the world tilting sideways as consciousness slipped away like water through his fingers. He woke up 3 days later in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and grief. The doctor spoke in gentle tones about spinal damage and physical therapy. But it wasn't until a stone-faced police officer entered the room that Ethan's world truly collapsed. "There was a fire at your apartment building last night," the officer said, not quite meeting Ethan's eyes. "I'm sorry to inform you that your partner, Michael Davidson, was identified among the victims." Ethan's throat closed around words that wouldn't come. This couldn't be real. Michael had been at the hospital with Theo. They were waiting for him. They were going to celebrate. "The child," Ethan managed to whisper. "Theo. Where is Theo?" The officer glanced down at his notes. "There's no record of a child registered to either of you. According to Mr. Davidson's family, they've claimed his remains and handled all necessary arrangements." In the weeks that followed, Ethan existed in a fog of medication and disbelief. His physical therapy sessions with Dr. David Rodriguez became the only structure in a life suddenly emptied of purpose. David's firm but compassionate approach forced Ethan to focus on the painful work of rebuilding his strength, even when his heart remained shattered. "Channel it," David would say during particularly grueling sessions. "Whatever you're feeling, the anger, the grief, put it into this moment. Your body is still fighting. Let it." Jennifer Morris, a no-nonsense lawyer who specialized in LGBT family cases, took on Ethan's case pro bono after hearing about his situation through Sarah Chen. Jennifer's investigation revealed disturbing inconsistencies. The fire inspector's report showed signs of potential arson, yet the case had been quickly closed. Hospital records from the night of the accident mysteriously disappeared. Most concerning of all, every trace of their adoption application for Theo had vanished from the agency's system. "Something isn't right," Jennifer told Ethan one afternoon in his hospital room. "The Davidson family has connections in this city, political, financial. They're making sure certain questions aren't being asked." But without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. Jonathan Davidson had recently announced his candidacy for state senate, his campaign built on traditional family values. The timing couldn't have been coincidental. When Ethan was finally released from the hospital, he returned not to the apartment he had shared with Michael, but to a sterile downtown condo Sarah had helped arrange. The walls were bare. The silence was absolute. The wheelchair felt like a constant reminder of everything he had lost. That night, alone in an unfamiliar place that wasn't yet home, Ethan made a decision. The world had taken everything from him, his mobility, his love, his future family, but it hadn't taken his mind. It hadn't taken his skills, and it hadn't taken his desire for justice. He pulled his laptop onto his lap, the blue light illuminating tears he no longer bothered to wipe away. If he couldn't have answers, he would have power. If he couldn't have justice, he would build something so significant that even the Davidsons couldn't touch him. If he couldn't have his family, he would create a legacy that would make them untouchable. Breakthrough Technologies was born that night, not from innovation or inspiration, but from grief transformed into cold determination. Ethan didn't know it then, but his path toward healing would take a decade to unfold, and would require him to become someone he barely recognized along the way. Life's cruelest moments don't just change our circumstances, they change who we are. Sometimes surviving means letting parts of yourself die while forging something new from the ashes. For Ethan, that transformation was just beginning. San Francisco magazine named him the Ice King of Silicon Valley. Forbes called him the brilliant recluse. The Wall Street Journal simply referred to him as Miller, as though his achievements had reduced him to a single name, a brand, a legend. 10 years had transformed Ethan from a grieving survivor into a tech titan whose reputation for brilliance was matched only by his reputation for ruthlessness. Breakthrough Technologies occupied a gleaming tower in downtown San Francisco, its sleek architecture a testament to its founder's philosophy: forward-looking, uncompromising, impenetrable. Employees spoke of Ethan in whispers, the CEO in the custom wheelchair, who could destroy a faulty product pitch with a single glance or approve million-dollar bonuses for exceptional work without changing expression. Few knew that behind the company's cutting-edge security software and revolutionary accessibility platforms lay a deeper purpose. Each algorithm had been originally designed to search for traces of Michael and Theo. Each security product contained scanning capabilities that continuously combed through public and private databases. Each innovation served two masters' profit in an unspoken search. The Anderson Foundation needs an answer on the Children's Hospital donation, Alex Morgan said, entering Ethan's minimalist office with her typical efficiency. As his personal assistant for 7 years, Alex was the only person at Breakthrough who knew the truth about Ethan's past. She had been there the night he received an anonymous envelope containing the last known photo of Michael, dated 3 days after his supposed death. "Double it," Ethan replied without looking up from his screen, "and make sure it's earmarked specifically for the pediatric trauma unit." What the public didn't see was how Ethan directed millions into funds supporting LGBT families and children in the foster system, or how he maintained an off-books investigative team continuously looking into the Davidson family, or how he personally reviewed every background check for children named Theo who entered the system nationwide. Raymond Chen, Sarah's brother and now Breakthrough's CTO, was one of the few who glimpsed beyond the facade. He had joined the company in its early days. After Sarah's death in a car accident that too closely resembled Ethan's own, Raymond understood loss, understood the walls built not to keep others out, but to keep oneself contained. "The West Coast Developers Conference wants you as keynote speaker," Raymond said during their weekly strategy meeting. "It would be the perfect platform to announce Project Phoenix." Project Phoenix, Breakthrough's most ambitious undertaking yet, was a secure communication platform designed specifically for vulnerable communities, children in abusive homes, LGBT youth in hostile environments, witnesses in protection programs. Officially, it was marketed as next-generation privacy technology. Unofficially, it was everything Ethan had needed 10 years ago. "Confirm it," Ethan agreed after a pause. "It's time we took this public." What Raymond didn't know was that the conference would bring Ethan back to San Francisco for the first time in nearly a decade. Back to the city where he had loved and lost. Back to where the Davidson family still wielded considerable influence, with Jonathan now a powerful state senator with rumored ambitions for higher office. That evening, Ethan reviewed the latest report on Senator Jonathan Davidson. His political star continued to rise, his platform still centered on protecting traditional families. His voting record showed consistent opposition to LGBT rights legislation, and he had recently spoken out against a bill expanding adoption access for same-sex couples. A notification appeared on Ethan's secure server. Congresswoman Diana Wilson, Jonathan's political rival, had just announced her intention to challenge him in the upcoming Senate race. Her campaign emphasized equality and justice, directly targeting Jonathan's regressive policies. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a flicker of something resembling hope. The Developers Conference coincided with a charity gala for foster children that Breakthrough had anonymously sponsored for years. Ethan had never attended, always sending Alex in his place. This year would be different. This year, he would face the ghost that had driven him for a decade. He wheeled himself to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, looking out at the twinkling city lights below, the same view he once shared with Michael, planning their future, dreaming of the family they would build. He touched the small photograph he kept in his pocket, the only image of Michael he allowed himself to keep visible. "I'm coming back," he whispered to the memory. "And this time, I'm not leaving without answers." What Ethan couldn't know was that across the city, in a modest apartment above a music shop, a 16-year-old boy named Theodore James sat at a piano, Playing a melody his father had taught him, a melody Ethan had once composed for Michael on their first anniversary, a melody that would soon bridge a decade of silence and secrets. Some journeys back to ourselves begin with a single note of recognition. For Ethan Miller, that note was about to be struck. The charity gala sparkled with San Francisco's elite, a sea of designer gowns and practiced smiles. Ethan navigated the crowd with practiced ease, his custom wheelchair gliding silently across marble floors. The tech world's most elusive billionaire had finally emerged, and the whispers followed him like shadows. The brilliant recluse himself, a venture capitalist, murmured nearby. Rumor has it he hasn't been seen at a public event in years. Ethan ignored the comments, his attention fixed on the event's purpose: fundraising for foster children and adoption services. The irony wasn't lost on him, supporting the system that had almost given him his son, then mysteriously erased all evidence of their connection. The sharp pain came without warning, a vice-like pressure in his chest that stole his breath and clouded his vision. Alex was at his side instantly, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. "I'm calling a medic," she insisted, already reaching for her phone. "No," Ethan managed through clenched teeth. "Just get me some air." She wheeled him toward a quieter hallway, away from curious eyes and champagne-fueled gossip. The pain began to subside as they approached a smaller room where the evening's entertainment was preparing. That's when Ethan heard it, a melody he had written a lifetime ago. Played with technical precision and emotional understanding that made his heart stutter. He signaled Alex to stop, listening as the notes washed over him. Through the partially open door, he saw a teenager at a grand piano, eyes closed in concentration, his fingers moving with confident grace across the keys. The boy wore a simple black suit, and around his wrist, a bracelet with a charm caught the light. "Wait here," Ethan told Alex, wheeling himself forward without waiting for her response. The music stopped as he entered. The boy turned, revealing features that struck Ethan like another physical blow. The same intelligent eyes he remembered from a 6-year-old building block towers. But there was something else. Something in the shape of his mouth, the angle of his jaw. That reminded Ethan painfully of Michael. "That piece," Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Where did you learn it?" The boy, no, young man, now studied him with an unreadable expression. "My father taught me. He said it was special." "Your father," Ethan repeated, his eyes drawn to the bracelet on the boy's wrist. From this distance, he could see the charm clearly, a small silver disc engraved with the intertwined letters M and E. "I'm Theodore James," the boy said, extending his hand. "But everyone calls me Theo." The name hit Ethan like another wave of pain. It couldn't be coincident. It couldn't be possible. Yet here was a teenager named Theo, playing Michael's song, wearing their initials on his wrist. Ethan took his hand, noticing the slight tremor in Theo's fingers. "I'm Ethan Miller." "I know exactly who you are," Theo replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I've waited a long time to meet you." Before Ethan could respond, event staff entered to prepare for Theo's performance. The moment fractured, but the connection remained a tenuous thread that Ethan wouldn't let break again. The next morning, Alex delivered the results of her overnight investigation. Theodore James lived in an apartment above Harmony Music Shop with his uncle, a music teacher named James Mitchell. School records showed a bright student with exceptional musical talent, several scholarships, and a remarkably thin paper trail before age 7. Ethan stared at the address on his tablet. The Sunset District, a world away from Silicon Valley power players and political dynasties. A perfect place to disappear. "You're going, aren't you?" Alex asked, though it wasn't really a question. Hours later, Ethan sat in his custom vehicle outside the modest music shop. Unlike his corporate headquarters with its gleaming glass and security systems, this building was warm brick in large windows displaying instruments. A bell chimed softly as he entered, navigating between guitars and sheet music stands. A man stood with his back turned, arranging violin bows in a display case. "Be right with you," he called over his shoulder. Ethan knew that voice. would know it anywhere. Despite the decade that had passed, his heart pounded against his ribs as the man turned. Michael Davidson. Older, with touches of gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, but unmistakably, impossibly so. Michael. For a moment, neither man spoke. The shop seemed to hold its breath along with them, dust motes suspended in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. "Ethan," Michael finally whispered, his face draining of color. "How did you—" "Your son," Ethan interrupted, his voice raw with emotion. "He plays my music." Michael gripped the counter, knuckles white. "Theo," he breathed. "He saw you at the gala." Ethan moved closer, searching the face of the man he had mourned for a decade. "You're supposed to be dead. I identified your remains. I buried you." "No." Michael shook his head, tears filling his eyes. "You buried an empty casket. You mourned a lie." He moved from behind the counter, approaching Ethan with hesitant steps. "A lie I've lived with every day since they forced me to disappear." "They," Ethan's voice hardened. "Your family, Jonathan." Michael nodded, the weight of a decade's deception evident in the slump of his shoulders. "They threatened everything, your company, your safety. They showed me photos of your accident, told me it was just the beginning." His voice broke. "They said they'd take Theo away permanently if I didn't die and leave San Francisco with him." The door to the back room opened, and Theo stood there, watching them with eyes too wise for his years. "He protected you," the boy said to Ethan, "and he never stopped loving you. Neither of us did." In that moment, surrounded by instruments that had witnessed a decade of secrets, Ethan Miller faced the impossible truth: his family had never truly died. They had been stolen, hidden, forced into shadows by power and prejudice. And now, against all odds, they had found each other again. The pain in Ethan's chest returned, but this time it wasn't medical. It was the sensation of a heart that had been frozen for too long, finally beginning to thaw with all the agony and possibility that rebirth entails. Sometimes, our greatest wounds contain within them the seeds of our most profound healing. For Ethan, Michael, and Theo, the long journey back to wholeness was just beginning. The conference room at Breakthrough Technologies hummed with tense energy as Ethan assembled his team. Jennifer Morris spread legal documents across the polished table while Alex organized digital files on the wall screen. Raymond Chen sat silently, still processing the revelation that Michael Davidson, the man whose death had shaped the company's founder, was very much alive. "What we're planning isn't just risky," Jennifer warned, her lawyer's caution evident. "It's declaring war against one of the most powerful political families in California." Ethan's expression remained resolute. "They declared war 10 years ago when they destroyed my family. I'm just finally fighting back." The evidence they gathered painted a damning picture: falsified death certificates bearing the signatures of Davidson-affiliated medical examiners, police reports with key details mysteriously redacted, financial transfers from Jonathan Davidson's campaign to the private investigator who had followed Ethan before his accident. Most damning was Lisa Green, the former hospital nurse who had helped Michael escape, who now battled terminal cancer and wanted to clear her conscience. The Davidson counterattack was swift and brutal. Anonymous sources questioned Ethan's mental stability. Breakthrough stock plummeted amid rumors of financial irregularities. Michael faced potential criminal charges for identity fraud. At school, Theo endured whispered accusations and not-so-subtle bullying. "Maybe we should stop," Michael suggested one night in Ethan's penthouse, watching the toll their fight was taking. "We have each other now. Maybe that's enough." Ethan wheeled himself to where Michael stood and took his hand. "Running and hiding didn't protect us. It won't protect Theo. Only the truth can do that now." Theo, who had been silently playing the piano across the room, stopped and turned to face his fathers. "I want to fight," he said with quiet determination. "I've lived with lies my whole life. I'm ready for the truth, whatever it costs." The opportunity came during a televised debate between Senator Jonathan Davidson and Congresswoman Diana Wilson. When the moderator opened the floor to public questions, Ethan wheeled himself to the microphone. The auditorium fell silent as cameras focused on the tech billionaire. Senator Davidson, Ethan began, his voice steady. Would you care to explain why you faked your brother's death and threatened a child's future to protect your political career? The chaos that followed was immediate. Jonathan's face contorted with shock as Michael appeared at the back of the hall with Theo at his side. Security moved toward Ethan, but Diana Wilson intervened, insisting that the question to be answered. These are outrageous accusations, Jonathan sputtered, but his confidence wavered as Jennifer Morris distributed evidence packets to journalists and Lisa Green entered with her medical records and sworn statement. What nobody expected was Elizabeth Davidson's reaction. Michael's mother rose from her front row seat, her dignified exterior crumbling as she approached her son for the first time in a decade. I knew, she admitted, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. I knew what Jonathan did. I was too weak, too afraid to stop him. She turned to face the audience, cameras capturing every word. My son deserved his family. My grandson deserved both his fathers. And I deserved to lose them for my cowardice. The Davidson empire didn't collapse overnight, but the foundation was irreparably cracked. Jonathan's campaign imploded amid criminal investigations. The family's carefully constructed image of moral authority lay in ruins. And most importantly, the truth long buried under power and privilege finally saw the light. 1 year later, the Theo Foundation headquarters opened its doors in downtown San Francisco. The modern building housed legal resources for LGBT families, support services for adopted children, and a state-of-the-art music therapy center where Theo himself volunteered on weekends. At the grand opening ceremony, Ethan sat on the stage, Michael standing proudly at his side. The audience included not just tech industry leaders and politicians, but families, all kinds of families, brought together by love rather than convention. 10 years ago, Ethan began, I thought I lost everything that mattered. What I didn't understand was that love doesn't disappear when buried under lies. It waits, it persists, it finds its way back to the light. As he spoke, Theo took his place at the grand piano, beginning to play the melody that had once reunited them. Newly elected Senator Diana Wilson joined them on stage to announce the introduction of Theo's Law, comprehensive legislation protecting adoption rights for all families. Elizabeth Davidson sat in the back row, her quiet presence a testimony to the possibility of redemption. Raymond watched from the side, seeing in his friend not the Ice King of Silicon Valley, but simply a father whose heart had finally come home. When the speeches ended and the formal photographs were taken, Ethan, Michael, and Theo found a private moment together away from the crowds. Three people who had survived a decade of separation, who had each carried a different kind of pain, now linked not just by past trauma, but by future promise. We made it, Michael whispered, squeezing Ethan's shoulder. Ethan covered Michael's hand with his own, watching Theo adjust his tie in a nearby mirror. No, we're just beginning. Have you ever found strength in facing a painful truth rather than hiding from it? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful healing comes from bringing the darkest secrets into the light. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales of courage, love, and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. Because the most important stories aren't fiction, they're the ones that remind us what it truly means to be human.